QF401 763 Sydney cleared to Melbourne via 16 right Dina departure. It's going to be a clear day. It looks there's no cloud out there, or very little cloud, and we've just got to be careful of Centre Point Tower, really to the north. A lot of traffic in the area. If we have any problems,
there is a great responsibility flying an aircraft with all the souls on board, and it's just something that you become used to, where I suppose maybe like an ambulance driver or a policeman, you can handle pretty much whatever's thrown at you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The captain speaking. My name is Elise Borden. With me on the flight deck today is First Officer Nathan Placer. We would like to extend a warm welcome aboard to you on Qantas Flight 401 to Melbourne. We'll be underway very shortly, just waiting for final cargo loading to be completed.
It's 40106, request pushback.
Qantas 401, good morning. Push approved.
OK, so let's go, shall we?
On a typical working day, 150 domestic flights connect Sydney and Melbourne. It's the world's second busiest corridor, only beaten by planes between Rio and Sao Paulo in Brazil.
It can feel like a traffic jam because there is just so much air traffic going into Sydney and Melbourne, and only a certain amount of tarmac that the aircraft can land on. So often we get holding, which involves a racetrack type of pattern to go round and round in circles because we simply can't pull over and park the brakes.
Captain Elise now has 75 minutes to get her passengers to Melbourne on time. As 170 tonnes of metal climbs, a crucial network watches over Elise.
Qantas 401, you can cancel the speed restriction below 10,000. Mate, Qantas 401's on your frequency.
Making sense of a wall of chatter is Jeff Whiteley and the team in Melbourne. They look over half the nation's airspace once flights leave local control.
The traffic in the Melbourne terminal area is building up. You've got all the customers airborne. The traffic is endless, really. Once the day begins in Sydney from 6 a.m, the traffic just begins Sydney, Melbourne, Melbourne, Sydney.
By 7 a.m, a line of aircraft waits to land.
Each one's neatly spaced with about the 3 minutes between each and every one, and that'll just continue for the next few hours.
In Melbourne, waiting for the first flight, a fleet of yellow taxis jockeying for prime position. Baggage handlers load and unload 35,000 pieces a day.
Qantas 401's final approach into Melbourne. It's just turned north of the field, aligning itself to runway 16. That's Qantas 401, so basically out of Sydney just after 6 and landing Melbourne 7:15.
In the past 5 years, flights between Sydney and Melbourne have soared 20% to more than 50,000 a year. This route, and all highways of flight, will expand as our economy and population grow. But what would all that traffic look like if you could see it from above? These are the GPS traces of every aircraft above our heads on a typical day. In the early hours, long-haul flights cruise across the night sky. At 6 a.m, Sydney's curfew lifts and the airspace erupts. Then the west comes online. Flights leave Perth for mines to the east and north. From coast to coast, air corridors fill, floating lanes jammed with traffic, mainly taking us to the nation's edges. It's a remarkable image that only fades when Sydney Airport shuts at 11 p.m.
Just over the M4 the moment, and this is what we've been talking about, the Cumberland Highway all morning after an earlier crash right here at South Wentworthville. We've got delays all the way back up into Maryland. It's a real mess here, unfortunately, trying to get to work.
I'm dropping in on a man who has a unique view of traffic from his red helicopter.
Fancy meeting you up here, Vic. Do you come here often?
Hello, Steve. You're looking very, very nice there.
I must say it's a lot more serene and orderly from up here than it is when you're stuck down in the middle of it.
Trying to make sense of chaos in Western Sydney is Vic Lorusso.
So, do you see any easy solutions?
I think you've got the best solution you're flying in at the moment, a helicopter.
As a radio reporter, he spends 400 hours a year tipping off drivers from on high.
So, Vic, we talk about peak hour traffic, but when is peak hour in Sydney?
Steve, peak hour in my eyes can stretch from 4:30 in the morning right up to midday. And if you talk to the professional drivers, the couriers, the truck drivers out there in Sydney during the day, their peak hour extends well into the early hours of the afternoon. If you're not on the road before 5 a.m. from the western suburbs, it's going to be very tough for you to get into Sydney and on time.
Yeah, that's no peak anymore, is it? It's an entire plateau.
Sydney drivers average just 26 kilometres an hour in the rush to work. That's worse than Greater London. The lucky ones are in Perth, racing along at 38 kilometres an hour. Traffic jams cost $13 billion a year in lost productivity, which will soar to $20 billion if changes aren't made soon. All our major cities endure similar road problems, including this one.
What's going on down there, Vic? There's no accident that I can see, but there's a hell of a snarl up.
No, well, that's a phantom traffic jam. No accidents, no breakdowns, just massive congestion. So you've got a group of motorists there, just accelerating when they get a little bit of a stretch of clear traffic, and then they're braking all of a sudden. And with the peak hour traffic coming to that bottleneck, and that's what's causing the backlog you're seeing at the moment.
I've got colleagues who work on the modelling of traffic, and they tell me that by changing people's behaviour, just their driving behaviour, you're actually affecting the flow of traffic itself. At least that's what some of the mathematical models would suggest. Simple little changes in behaviour can have really big effects.
Exactly right, and it can be very frustrating when all you're seeing ahead of you is just cars banked up, and you've just got to add a little bit more patience into your daily commute.
Given it's this bad on the roads, surely the answer is more public transport. But across all cities, just 1 in 5 commuters takes public transport to work.